A man is standing up to Hamas. He's yelling to his Palestinian comrades, "I'm one of you, but you are cowardly people. We could have avoided this attack." Are people standing up to Hamas? Welcome to another episode of the Daily Objective, where we're gonna be talking about one specific case, about a man in a sort of speaking out against Hamas, standing out against Hamas, and if it has any wider implications. Joining me today is James Valliant. Hey James, how are you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
Pretty good. So let's go directly to the story, and we'll stay a little bit on this specific example. But there have been examples in the past we have covered. But let's talk about this one. So there's been a video. We won't play it because it's a bit more. I'm not sure if it's nice on YouTube because he has like completely bloodied face, and it looks terrible. But basically, this man, he's on camera. It has been sort of going around on the internet, and yeah, he's speaking out against Hamas. He's criticizing Hamas. He's telling, it was wrong to attack Israel on October 7. One quote he says is, he's a doctor. He says, "I'm an academic doctor. I had a good life, but we have a filthy leadership. They got used to our bloodshed. May God curse them. They are scum." And also, he called his own Palestinians that they are cowards for not also standing up, that they could have avoided. So I have many things to say about this person, but let me go first to you, James. James, what do you think? Is this guy, I mean, something you mentioned before the show, is this guy a hero?
I think his statement belies that to some extent. He had a good life. He was living well under Hamas rule. That's the premise that I would question in considering whether or not this guy's a real hero. Now, some of his
So,
comments.
since you mentioned it, let me talk because I have the anecdote for it, and then I'll go right back to you.
Sure.
But so, for those who don't know, I live in Slovakia, which is a newly found republic. We used to be part of the Soviet bloc. We used to be a communist, one-party dictatorship. And some people say, it used to be good under communism. We lived well. And one thing you can say about those people is they were either directly in the Communist Party or their family were in the Communist Party. That's how usually those kind of people have nice memories uh, of the communist regime. And when I ask people from different countries, it is very similar there. It's similar in Russia, that when people think nicely of Soviet Russia, it usually meant they benefited from the regime. But
Yeah.
let me go back to you, James.
Well, Gaza was a hellish place to live. It still is a hellish place to live. It's been a hellish place to live, you know, since Hamas took over 18 years ago. What is it, about 17, 18 years ago? Hamas is not done a thing, as we've noted on this channel many times, to make the Gaza area a peaceful, prosperous place for their people to have a decent life in. No, that hasn't been on the agenda for Hamas at all. So for the mere fact that this guy says, "I had a good life," tells me he's an exceptional case anyway. He was perfectly willing to work with the Hamas, with the any, get this, any of the existing Palestinian leadership groups are all evil. And if he's not willing to have worked with them, how could he have had a good life? So I have to agree with you there. Let me back up though and discuss resistance generally. On the other hand, we look back at World War II, and we think of like the French resistance very famously. De Gaulle, Leclerc. These men were heroes because if the Nazis had ever captured them, as opposed to just killing them, being part of the French resistance to the Vichy, Nazi France, they would have been sent to concentration camps, tout de suite. And so they were brave men, no doubt. To be part of a resistance against dictatorship is to take a risk. When we think of the men who tried to assassinate Hitler, Germans, high-ranking members of the German military were involved in some of these plots to kill Hitler. what courage they're doing. They are aware that they're risking their own lives. Um, this is true of resistance movements in general. It takes a degree of courage. On the other hand, that degree of courage is what's morally required when you are living under a dictatorship, when you are facing the need to resist the Nazis or the communists or Hamas. Then you either get the hell out of that place, even at the risk of your own life, or you risk your life to resist it. Otherwise, what you're saying is that living as a slave is no big deal to me. And if you're actually required to live as a slave under totalitarianism, the rational decision is to risk your life to unseat it if you can't get the heck out of there. And so while it takes courage, while these men are heroes who are resisting totalitarian governments, who are resisting oppressive governments, nonetheless, they're doing the rational thing, the thing that will serve their long-term interests. As we objectivists define it, that's what morality consists of. And so I would have to say that insofar as someone is criticizing Hamas, even this guy's being critical of Hamas, he's being to some extent brave, but he's saying I had a good life. He's saying that another line that was very interesting is October 7th only hurt our cause. It helped Israel. You see, his attitude is still anti-Israel. It's just that strategically we may have overplayed our hands on October 7th. That's not a hero. A hero would be the guy who says, no, Israel has a right to exist, and I oppose the genocidal anti-Israeli intentions of Hamas. That's what a real hero would say. And a real hero would, of course, do something about it, do something based on this knowledge that he has. So do we see an organized resistance among Palestinians like we saw an organized resistance to Vichy in France with de Gaulle and Leclerc? No, we do not. There is no such organized resistance movement. There's no organized pro-Israel movement among so-called Palestinians. And that's what it would take for me to say that there's an actual resistance. Now, is it heartening for me to read an article that shows that people are being openly critical of Hamas? Yes. But as you point out, the nature of those criticisms don't give me much confidence that these people really know what they're talking about, are really heroes, or wouldn't be happy to live under some other version of Islamicist theocracy, one perhaps that doesn't make strategic mistakes like October 7th.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the start, we've talked about these sort of stories before. Someone speaks out, and it's always, but usually, so one thing I think that there's a difference now is usually when we talked about it, it was usually Israeli news reporting on it. This specific, so the video is just shared publicly, but BBC has actually published an article on it. And going through the article, I think it almost makes you wonder what is the motivation for writing such an article, because it has been, especially the quotes they have been using, one person is quoted, many people are speaking out against Hamas. People are naming their donkeys after Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza. There's something going on. People are actually hating on it. But we've covered, or there have been polls made in both Gaza, both in the Israeli occupied areas and the ones still where Hamas is still under control. And these polls have also been conducted in the West Bank. What do they show? A large support for Hamas that has increased since October 7th. Large support for October 7th. It's much more in the West Bank. Usually when you don't have to suffer the consequences of your action, it makes it easier to not change your mind. But even in Gaza, the support for both Hamas and October 7th is still high and hasn't dropped below what it was on October 7th. So I would only ask, what is the purpose of publishing such an article? Again, is it to signal to Israel that, that you have to stop? There are people standing up. It's over for Hamas. No, if there was an election, Hamas would get elected. That's what would happen.
Or worse. See, there are divisions, strong, sharp political divisions among Palestinians. Those divisions are not essential to the point. Whether it's the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, Hezbollah, some other activist Islamist group, I don't care what the division is, they all hate Israel. They're all united in destroy Israel, destroy Israel. They're all united in their fundamental basis for their ideology, in the fundamental basis of their ideology. Where they differ is on a question of tactics and strategy. And such tactics and strategy are not the essential difference. You know, there are a lot of communists who think that if somehow, perhaps Trotsky had succeeded Lenin instead of Stalin, that things would have been all sorts of better. I dispute that utterly. You know, Lenin's testament was smuggled out of Russia, and they found out that Lenin really would have wanted Leon Trotsky, not Joseph Stalin, to take over. But both men fundamentally, Trotsky said, God is the state is God. There may have been slight differences, cosmetic differences. I don't know what that would have impact it might have had on certain other things, but there is no ideological division between Trotsky and Stalin when it came to the ideology of collectivism and communism. And so to me, that's, you know, being suppressed as, you know, Stalin went after very close associates, mind you. He was such a paranoid. It's not a different, much less these Trotskyites. You had Trotsky assassinated in Mexico with an ice pick, Stalin. Just, you know, nice guy Stalin. But was there really much to choose? I'll just press my Trotskyite, the fans of Trotsky out there to consider, would there really have been much of a difference? Similarly, if you hear someone complaining about Hamas in Gaza, would this guy, what he's saying is, oh, yeah, I'd vote for the Palestinian Authority. I'd vote for this other Islamist group. No, the divisions are superficial.
Yeah, and
just now the real heroes.
Just to point out, because some people say Fatah is the less moderate. Mahmoud Abbas is super unpopular. Who is actually popular, and I don't have his name right now, but it is the person who is currently in the Israeli jail for killing Jews, for being a terrorist. That's their guy. That's the popular guy.
And that kind of tells you something about Palestinians in general, that in the wake of all this, the Palestinian Authority has become less popular in the West Bank, and more radical groups have become more popular in the West Bank. It shows just how superficial these differences are between the groups. And the fact is, these groups can criticize one another, do criticize one another, but it's really over minor tactical issues. Was October 7th counterproductive or not? Which is what one of this guy's comments go to. If there are heroes, you ask whether this guy's a hero. No, I don't think so. His ideology, his position, just, you know, gives it away. He's one of these other Islamists who wants Israel destroyed and just thinks Hamas is tactically doing something wrong and brought hell upon them unnecessarily in Gaza. That is a very different position than someone who really supports the existence of Israel and opposes the genocidal intent of groups like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. The real heroes will never be named in this context because they are such a minor thing. Why? It takes courage, yes, to be truly out as a critic, but I don't think many of those people exist. And insofar as they do exist, they may be cooperating with Israeli intelligence. If there are Arab Muslims in the West Bank or Gaza who are heroes, they're probably, I would imagine that Israel, Mossad, has sources in those areas. And if those guys are sources, they have to remain under total wraps. They have to be top secret. They have to pretend as though they're, in fact, getting along and going along, if not working with the bad guys. Similarly, in Iran, Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, has all kinds of sources, and they seem to have remarkable knowledge about what's going on in Iran. That suggests to me that there are operatives in Iran who are helping Israel. These are the people who are the real heroes, and they really are risking their life. If the helping Israel is ever found out, these people will face torture and death, no doubt. But their names aren't going to appear in stories. So that does, as you point out, reveal the true motive here. They want to create this fiction that there are large numbers of innocent Palestinians. To do that, we have to play up the fact that there are critics of Hamas. But these critics of Hamas are not necessarily pro-civilization, anti-collectivist, anti-Islamist, are they? No. There could just be tactical differences, such as there are between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. These people aren't really heroes. They really aren't calling for something fundamentally different. No, they're not. And let me suggest that what few, and the idea is, look, see, there are critics of Hamas out there. How can you be bombing all of these innocent critics of Hamas? No, this guy had a good life under Hamas. And he's saying to Hamas, you guys screwed up because you took away the good life I had under Hamas away from me. And you gave Israel a, quote, gift on October 7th, which is now smashing, Gaza. And I don't like that. You guys miscalculated. He says you guys miscalculated. He's not an innocent Palestinian, but it helps Western media to promote the idea that there is such a thing as an innocent Palestinian. Yeah, that's really what it is.
So first, thank you, Bonnie, for your super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for your super chat. So people are reminding me in the chat, but I actually looked up the poll. So Marwan Barghouti is the guy, and in the most recent poll, oh, I think there's even more recent one. This one is from March, so it's not as recent. There's one more recent one, but I don't have it open. But basically, Mahmoud Abbas has 8% of support of the people. Ismail Haniyeh, who's from Hamas, has 23%. And Marwan Barghouti, again, a terrorist, currently sitting in Israeli jail for killing Jews, has 40%, which is the plurality. 30% of people wouldn't go to election. But
notice that when you add the Hamas and this other guy together, that's some 60%. So in other words, in the West Bank, that faction, the actual killers of Jews, have much greater popularity.
No, that's total, both in Gaza and West Bank. Marwan Barghouti is actually more popular in the West Bank than in Gaza.
More popular in the West Bank. So think about that. It's the actual present day killers of Jews that really have the popularity, and the Palestinian Authority's popularity is waning. Abbas's popularity is waning because you see, he's really not killing he's being way too moderate. He's being way too, even though he pays a bounty for Islamist terrorists to kill Jews, he's just way too moderate for these people. Now think about that. No, it's the people who are actually killing Jews, actively killing Jews. Those are the factions that are more popular, and the more aggressive in your anti-Semitic collectivist mysticism and violence, the more popular you are, which tells you something about Palestinian culture and the Palestinian population in general.
So the question from the title is, are Palestinians standing up to Hamas? And I'd say no.
You'd see armed resistance. People physically doing something to push back. You don't see it. If they saw the issue with any kind of clarity, it's a life and death issue. It's a life and death issue that they're living under Hamas. If they really recognize that, they would, as I say, they would either get the heck out of the area, or they would actively be a part of a militant resistance against Hamas. And they're not.
So there are, single acts of people speaking out against Hamas, but what do we know about the Palestinians in Gaza? Hamas operates in hospitals with doctors just going by. Hamas operates in UNRWA buildings. Palestinian civilians are holding Hamas hostages. Hamas holds ammunition in civilian buildings, civilian homes. Where is a single instance of a hospital employee informing IDF Hamas is here, Hamas has a command center here? Where is an UNRWA employee coming out saying Hamas has a command center here? Where is a Palestinian civilian coming out and saying we are holding hostages, which Hamas is paying us to do, but we do want to stand up and we will give out the money, we will go into danger, we will not support this regime? Where is any of that?
I understand that Noah was held in private Palestinian home before she was released by an Israeli rescue operation.
Rescued,
Yeah,
not
released
released.
by Israel, rescued by Israel. And where was she being held? In a private home of a doctor, as I recall. Yeah, the hospitals were being used. Now, if there were, now, which the only little proviso I'd put to your statement is there may have been people working in Gaza hospitals who were giving Israel information, but they are so few in number that they are provide, and I'll bet you they're providing information to Israeli intelligence. So we'd never hear about them. I don't want to hear about them because they could be providing information to Israel. They are doing a very dangerous, brave thing if they're actively helping Israel. Those are the only heroes here that, and they're not even on the radar screen because they have to remain invisible. They have to remain invisible. Any true heroes among the Palestinians are so few and are doing something so dangerous that, let me suggest, we don't even hear their names. We don't even hear their names. But you're absolutely right. The basic, the most educated professional, the most educated professional ones among the Palestinian population working in hospitals and schools have to be largely pro-Hamas, don't they? They've been putting up with weapons. They've been putting up with tunnels. They've been allowing their facilities, hospitals and educational facilities, where sick people, babies and children are, to be used. So far from the educated populace among the Palestinians opposing terrorism, it is the educated populace which in particular has been sanctioning, supporting, and helping the terrorists. How else do weapon caches get found? How else do tunnel entrances get found in hospitals and schools? But the most educated part of the Palestinian population is support. The most educated part of the Palestinian population must be largely in direct support of their terrorist aims.
So the thing about maybe we don't know about these Palestinians standing up, you know, I'm willing to bite that bullet. I'll bite my words after the fact if we learn they were. But again, I think the numbers of the polls suggest something very sinister. The fact that there is nothing, and the fact that again we haven't seen anyone actually, we haven't seen anything suggesting that there is large resistance or any resistance to Hamas or any sort of. We've seen some stories of a sort of like, because I remember there was one specific story. I'm not sure if it was titled as in Palestinian helping, but I think there was someone who used to live in Gaza but is now living in Israel proper, or maybe just going to work to Israel. And basically, on October 7th, he took his truck, he went into the I think either kibbutzim or someone in the area and saved many Jews by basically helping them escape. And he has been giving a permanent, I'm not sure if citizenship or permanent resident in Israel because of it. But again,
I hope protection.
he was again. I can exactly remember if he was living in Gaza and just going to work to Israel, or if he was already living in Gaza, or living in Israel proper, but used to live in Gaza and now has been given basically a permanent status. But again, this is a single instance, and what we've seen actually, even from people who have the work permits, who go to work in Israel, they use the fact that they know the area. They use the fact they've given the information to Hamas, so Hamas could commit this act. So even people who have a chance to see something better, who go into Israel and see that there is something else, even those people, you know, I mean, just to go into something completely else, but imagine, you know, if you are living in North Korea, it's hard for me to criticize any of the citizens there. It is really regime that's suppressing any sort of dissent and any sort of outside opinion to such an extent that it's hard to see. But imagine if North Koreans were going daily into South Korea and saw there is something else, there is a difference, and did nothing about. That is what's happening. What's happening in Gaza. There are people going into Israel, and they do have access to internet. They know there is a world out there, and
They
they are
can know
doing
better.
nothing about it.
I'm not sure that North Koreans have access to, international media in the
No,
way I.
no, it's complete. It's there is no.
Exactly. So it is distinct, but in both cases, though, it's the West's appeasement of the ideology, either exterior or interior. In the case of Hamas, it's particularly gross because Western intellectuals give you American university professors are giving moral sanction to this savage culture. So insofar as the West is sort of giving, sanction to this Islamist ideology and culture, we are telling them it's okay to have this ideology and you're victims. And that's why, in part, why we're not creating, helping to create and foster the conditions for an armed resistance. But that's what I would need to see. I would need to see an armed resistance. I would need to see using the French resistance again as my model. I'd need to see a de Gaulle organizing Palestinian, the equivalent of a de Gaulle or a Leclerc organizing Palestinians into an armed resistance against the terrorists and straightforwardly saying we want to peacefully live with Israel. We are fighting for civilization against Islamism. But we don't see that, do we? Not in any organized way.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the day when we'll see some resistance, when we'll see
Yeah.
uh, people standing up and maybe recognizing that they should want something better, and that Israel is the only way right now through which it can be done. But I'm not so sure. So thank you, James, for joining me today. We'll be wrapping up. So in just about 2 minutes, we have the reality show extra, where me and Morgan are going to be talking about 4-day work week and a 6-day work week. We're going to be comparing news from UK, where there's been talks about the 4-day work week, but the new Labour government is saying they will not do anything about it. They will not push it through. Uh, they are rejecting it. While in Greece, they have actually instituted a 6-day work week. So we'll be talking about both of those. The title is "Work, Bane of the Unions." So make
Well, I'm
sure.
not sure about these our labor comrades, if they're quite the same comrades as they used to be. But you can't miss that, folks. Thank you, Daniel.
So putting that in the chat. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, James, and bye bye.
Bye bye.